I'm with David Bedein from the Center of Near East Policy Research, and today we're talking about UNRWA. So first of all, what is UNRWA?
UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, based on the idea that you have a right to take your home back from 1948, even though you've never seen it, and it's now the right of return by force of arms. So it's a little bit revised. And the 500,000 or so people who live in UNRWA refugee camps in Judea, Samaria, Gaza, Jerusalem, and also in Lebanon and Syria, they have it ingrained in them as part of their not only culture, but also part of their religion. And Israel has to deal with an entity formed on the basis that they have the right to kill Jews.
And why are there still Palestinian refugees after 70 years?
When I studied criminology, and nothing happens if there's not an incentive. And the incentive to stay in the refugee camps and get really good compensation, that's what plays into their decision. And you have it's not a great life, but you have a good life. You can work, you can have a day job and still get money for water, electricity, and other goodies. And it's a very profit-making kind of situation. And of course, half of the people in the refugee camps are connected to terror groups who are paid very nicely. It's like a luxury terror organization. And they don't hesitate to admit it. That's one of the easy things about my job as an investigative journalist dealing with UNRWA. They're very, very clear. Whereas if I took a time machine and went back to studying the Nazis during the war or after the war, they didn't want to admit anything. And they're very proud of what they're doing. They're proud of killing. They even have a law that if you murder a Jew, you get a salary for life.
Now Israel has outlawed UNRWA. What does that mean today?
That means that what the Israel outlaw of UNRWA means that UNRWA can't function in anywhere that Israel has sovereignty. That means Jerusalem, and that's the most important thing. That doesn't mean that the UNRWA is going out of business. Quite the opposite. UNRWA has been strengthened in the last few days because Israel is basically not touching the other 58 refugee camps. The one that they are touching will probably take apart and dismantle is in Shuafat in Jerusalem. But the other 58, they're stronger than ever before, and Israel is probably not going to interfere with the schools, even though the curriculum, and I've shared one of their school books where you have the description of a woman who murdered 38 Jews, and she's, how shall I say, she is praised, lionized, deified, very important. There's even songs in the UNRWA school books about extermination of Jews. The Nazis never had that. They tried to hide it because they kind of felt in their instincts that they would have a kind of a Nuremberg trial later on, therefore they didn't want to be convicted. These people don't care.
Is UNRWA a terrorist organization, or are they an organization that's been infiltrated by terrorists?
There's no infiltration. Everything is done openly. In 2009, we were commissioned by the European Parliament to cover the elections of UNRWA. And openly, the people who won the union elections of the teachers and of the workers, it was open. They were run Islamic Jihad and Hamas, what's called the Islamic Bloc. And this is not an infiltration, no. This is open. This is open sources, open elections. There is nothing conspiratorial here. And the thinking in the Israeli army is it doesn't matter what happens in the civilian sector. What the people in the Israeli army only are finding out this year during the war is that the indoctrination has affected thousands of children, and they're planning a war which is going to go on for 20, 30 years, based on the fact that there's a whole generation since children from the age of 6 in the year 2000 were brought into a school system that teaches the children the value of murder. And that's something which is almost newsworthy. The value of murder? Yeah. And children who look otherwise otherwise normal, they're very clear in terms of their intention to murder Jews. So,
how was UNRWA involved in October the 7th?
Well, that's what we have. I just put out an investigative study. What I show over a period of 15 years, we conducted filming of summer camps of the UNRWA schools. And the children went through training with guns, with training in hijacking soldiers, hijacking children, hijacking women, raping women. One of the issues that we exposed years ago was how UNRWA camps in Bethlehem, and to prove their acumen in Bethlehem, they went and raped children in the Beit schools to show how loyal they are, that they will go up against Islam, and by raping X amount of children I also found girl children who were in the Bejalish schools, which is a Christian schools. They prove themselves. So this whole business of being inured to violence and to the consequences of violence, being able to go home and tell your parents what you've just done and feel good about it and get no negative feedback. And we filmed the children going through military training, the children as young as 9, and they took home the Kalashnikovs. Now, a story that hasn't come out yet, there's been a high amount of children killed in this campaign. How many of them were armed? Because what they said in the UNRWA summer camps, you can take the Kalashnikovs home with you. So how many of them were armed? They didn't know quite how to use them, quite how to defend themselves, so they were mowed down. And we wanted to make a sequel of one of our movies, which was called UNRWA Child Soldier. We were told by the families, well, the children are dead now because they were killed in combat. They didn't know anything about military training. They knew how to shoot the gun. And that's something which is rather shocking.
Have weapons, rockets been found in UNRWA facilities?
Well, that is something that we conducted a thorough study, which is on my website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com. We show the extent to which, have it elucidated, that the extent to which UNRWA schools became depots for armories for the weapons. And every soldier who was in this campaign saw it. It's not something that David Bedein, as a journalist, has to do such hard work. Everyone, because the people in the Israeli army are from Israeli society, and it's one of the most reported issues, the extent to which UNRWA schools and UNRWA medical clinics were filled with guns. And a close friend of ours was killed walking into a medical clinic, which looked otherwise, innocuous, but they booby-trapped it. So that's the story.
Does the world not get this? We've got people condemning Israel's decision to actually outlaw the UN.
The world has no idea what's going on. So in this generation of journalism, everything is vetted for, extremism, anti-Arabism. And a friend of mine I was speaking to, I'm from Philadelphia, speaking to my childhood friend in Philadelphia, and she couldn't understand why these images are coming out because the other stuff doesn't come out. And in the mainstream media, that's really a shame because it's so open, so easy to film it. We photographed 902 pictures of graffiti which show Arabs murdering Jews. And those 902 pictures were in the areas of the schools. And this is very important. The mainstream media doesn't use it. And I'm in the press center right now where all the major media are. They don't have it, but they're very selective in what they want to do, and they don't want to alienate anybody. I don't care about alienating anyone. I care about telling the truth.
So Israel is wanting to outlaw UNRWA. They have facilities in, for instance, Bethlehem, hospitals and schools. Does that mean that they're not going to be able to run anymore, or are they still going to be able to run them?
Is strengthened 10 times over in the last few days because Israel's not taking apart or dismantling any UNRWA facilities outside Jerusalem. So UNRWA will function and function very well, and I think this is going to boomerang on Israel because it forbids contacts between the Israeli government officials and UNRWA. So if an Israeli government official, here's theoretically, which is really crazy, if an Israeli government official says to UNRWA, would you please remove your school books, he can be arrested for having ties with UNRWA. It's really crazy. The short-term thing, and what I've seen in my 54 years in Israel, is the short-term thinking which characterizes people in Israel.
Is the UN anti-Semitic?
No. I had 4 meetings with all my experts, with Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. He treated us very well. And when we showed him the school book, which features a murderer, he contacted UNRWA and said, get rid of that book. They got rid of it for a year and brought it back. A group of anti-Israel activists got to UNRWA and they got to Guterres, influenced him that UNRWA is a criminal, that Israel is a criminal entity, and they convinced him. But Guterres, I met him in April 2017 when he gave a talk at the Diaspora Museum about the fate of the Jews, and he was crying. He was crying. His wife is the head of the Jewish Museum in Portugal, and he was really something to see. So he's not anti-Semitic. There are other people there, but the people around them are influenced very much, and they are convinced. The UN staff in Israel are convinced that the Israeli government, the Israeli army, are purposely murdering children, and that's part of the problem.
Now, we've had the situation in Lebanon. Is the UN responsible for the problem that we have in Lebanon with Hezbollah embedded in the south?
Much worse than that. I was present at Beta Gruen Press Center in the negotiations which were concerning Resolution 1701, which was unenforceable. So Hezbollah had to be pushed back and this, that, and they didn't push back. And UNIFIL, whose job it was to push them back, didn't do their job.
So the UN are responsible for this.
Absolutely. UN, if there were courts, they would be brought to, if there were courts of justice, UNIFIL would be indicted tomorrow morning. But they're not courts of justice. The UNIFIL is under threat from terrorist organizations.
What is your hope for the future?
Hope for the future is that we will have a victory with a white flag and unconditional surrender. So, like the Japanese and Germans did in 1945. But we're far from it, because right now there's still the mentality in Israel and in the West that you can have a ceasefire, which is a hudna, not really a ceasefire. Hudna means it's an Arabic term that you can have a ceasefire now, but later on you make war. So my hope is that we will see a ultimate. It's going to take a while, because I have to get out of the mentality of a peace process. That we'll have a surrender and a white flag. But you and I are young. We weren't around during World War II. In World War II, there was I had some retirees working for me who remember that period of time when there was a debate as to whether to contain Hitler or to defeat Hitler. And until 1943, the idea was to contain him. Only when they got to the point of realizing they had to defeat him, but they had to change their mentality. Their mentality is, let's contain him, let's win the battles, not win the war. That's where we're at right now in Israel. To win the battles and not the war. We have a war, and when you have a war, you have to end. My son-in-law is going off today to Lebanon, to actually near Lebanon, and it's a real challenge. He's got 5 little children, and I have altogether 12 grandchildren, and this is a terrible thing what we're going through.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
IsraelBehindTheNews.com. You'll also see how people can donate to our work. We're the only agency in Israel, or maybe on Earth perhaps, that does news investigations through a nonprofit, through people who give us donations so we can do our work better. We've produced 27 movies, which are on our site, on the IsraelBehindTheNews.com site. We've done it on location in the UNRWA refugee camps with the cooperation of the UNRWA, of journalists who live in UNRWA. And we've also been through all 1,000 school books, and we've had an analysis of the, as you mentioned before, of the presence of terrorists in UNRWA facilities. So we try to do a good job, but it's tough. It's tough because we have to depend on people's good heart to give us donations.
Well, David, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you very much, and I'll say very clearly, it's tough for us right now. People think that the problem was solved, and with UNRWA, the problem has just begun. So we need help to do our work. We want to film in Bethlehem especially, and to show not only the UNRWA camps, but how the UNRWA schools are being infiltrated by Iran. This is where the infiltration is happening, and the extent to which the children are being taught to kill Jews and also to kill Christians in Bethlehem.